Hello and welcome back to another little mini tutorial. For this video, we are going to be looking at how to set up and get started with Unity for video game design. Um, Unity is one of the major engines, obviously, that we use for video game design. Other popular ones being stuff like Unreal Engine 5 or the more recently kind of popular Godot. But Unity is going to be the one that's kind of like targeted more towards independent, indie, hobby level game developers. And so, as such, I really like using it for teaching new and kind of up and coming game developers just because it is so simple to get started with. That's not to say that you can't also get started easily with the other game engines. But in my opinion, Unity has a lot more available, at least right now at the time of this filming, to help get new baby developers ready to go. And so here on my screen, I have the Unity Hub, which is when you go and you download actual Unity, the first kind of piece of the software that's the managing software for the Unity suites. And so let's take a look through this real quick, and then I'll get started into how to load up actual project files, how to create some projects that you might need to use for my classes. So let's see real quick. Okay, so here is, like I said, Unity Hub. And so on the left here, we're going to have kind of the general like project types, the things that we're going to click through. And then in the middle, we'll see the kind of specific information. So you can see on mine, I've obviously been playing with a few different projects. And so yours, when you first launch it, will probably be empty. If it's the kind of thing you've used Unity in the past and you're just now reinstalling Hub, you might have to go in and like re-find your projects and your project folders and stuff like that. And so anyways, that's what this first tab is, our projects. And I'll come back to this and I'll show you how to make new projects or how to add existing projects. But that's just what this first kind of default one is. And so here you can see I've got a lighting project. I've got an old dinosaur game. I've got one of the early Unity rollerball tutorials, a few different things. And it gives us a little bit of information. If you're using the Unity Cloud stuff, you can see if it's connected or not. I don't use them. I use GitHub for my source control and kind of online uploads. You can see when it was modified, and importantly, you can see which version of Unity you last used a project from. And this is going to be important because you want to make sure that you have the correct version of Unity in order to operate any given projects. And so that's what our next section is going to be, is the installs. And so if I click on that, you can see I have two different installs and where those installs actually live. And so I have the brand new Unity 6. I just downloaded it so I can start playing with it. But then I also have an older 2022.3.7 F1. And those both say LTS, which means long-term support. Up here in the top right, if we click Install Editor, it'll give us several different versions. And so you can see there's Unity 6. I think that's the one that I have right now. LTS 22.3.52 F1, which is actually different than the version I have installed, but also LTS. And then an older 2.21 F21 F1F, and then an even older 21.345 F1. And so anytime you see that LTS, that long-term support, that means that that is a very stable build that they plan to support with minor updates and or like troubleshooting customer support type stuff. And so I usually say, use these LTS versions whenever possible. But you can get in there and you can get other versions and even older versions. But, each new version, especially major versions like 21, 22, Unity 6, they'll have different tools available to them. Something important to know is that you want to try to keep using the same version over the course of a project. And so if I start a game or if I start a project and I had originally been using this 22.3 7F1, I want to try to continue to use this very specific version and not upgrade until I'm done with that project. And so, for example, it might be something that you think like, oh, well, I was using 22.3, but Unity 6 just came out. It should probably be better to upgrade to Unity 6 because it's got all the new bells and whistles and toys. And that's not actually true. In fact, it can actually break your projects in pretty interesting and horrific ways. And so once you start a project, once you start a game, you almost always want to keep using that specific or as close to that project as possible between all of your devices so that there's nothing that goes wrong and gets weird. A lot of the times when we have new versions of Unity release or any game software, any game engine software, newer versions will add new tools, but they'll also sometimes delete or depreciate older tools. And so they might not work the same way. And so it's very common for things to break if you switch versions. And so for me, like if I'm using my older version, my 22.3, so like if I'm doing tutorials that are a little bit older, I'll use this version. But if I was going to start new projects or if I was going to play with the new tools that just released with Unity 6, obviously I would have to use this Unity 6 version. I will say that you're more likely to be able to go from an older version to a newer version and have less problems. But going from a newer version back to an older version, you're much, much more likely to run into incompatibilities and or completely break your projects. And so just things to kind of keep in mind. And so anyways, you can look through, there's lots of different releases. Again, if you already had a version of Unity installed and every now and then it might forget like where it was, you can go back and locate it and then go find the folder that you actually saved your things to. But anyways, there's that. Next tab, we've got the Learn tab. And this is kind of like the little mini lessons and tutorials that Unity does. And this is part of the reason why I like Unity so much for beginner developers is that it has an absolutely enormous collection of tutorials. A lot of these are older, but they do a pretty good job of trying to update these tutorials kind of as new versions go. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's kind of frustrating when you find something that's not actually up to date. But they do a pretty good job, better than at least Epic and Unreal Engine does. And I can't speak specifically to Godot yet. I haven't had enough time to really get in and play with it too much. But at least relative to Unreal Engine, who has recently added kind of their own Learn hub, so to speak, it is not well curated. It's not well managed, at least relative to Unity. And so they've got featured tutorials, kind of things that they think you might like. You can go into recommended, you can go into downloaded and see the things that you've actually added. But this right here is what I would usually say for you guys to go to. And sometimes when I provide lessons for my classes that say like, hey, we're going to do something in Unity, it's usually going to be either directly from here or at least based on one of these things. And so if you click on that button, it will take us to the Unity Hub. And so you can see here's my hub specifically. And there's lots of different things. And the nice thing is that as you start working on things, it kind of like follows along with you. And then it can kind of give you more specific recommendations based on the tutorials that you've actually done. And so you can go to My Learning and again, see specifically kind of like what you've done, how far you've progressed. It's got like a point-based system to kind of gamify the learning a little bit, which is, it's fine. It's good. But it's got pathways, and it's the pathways that I really like because especially as someone who's coming into this maybe with no game design experience, these are kind of collections of tutorials that are put together in kind of like classes almost. And so like for my game design 1 students, especially at the high school level, like we will do a lot with this Unity Essentials, which is specifically learning how to use the Unity software. And so like if you are brand new or if you're coming from Unreal Engine or something like that, this might be a good thing to start with. And so you can click on this pathway and you can see it's got lots of different little levels that you can do and then missions. And so these are kind of like a course. And then each of these missions is like a class. like 1 day's worth of stuff. And sometimes these are like 20 minutes, and sometimes they're like an hour. And so they're pretty good and bite sized things that you can kind of get through. And so there's lots of different things depending on kind of what you're interested in. And so, again, Unity Essentials would be like, how to use Unity. And so it says recently updated. So I'm sure there's a new one for Unity 6, which just recently launched. The Junior Programmer is a good one for kind of getting into how to use C# and scripting specifically for Unity stuff. And so this one I like with my, again, high school kids, my more advanced ones, because it allows us to do lots of little mini games and see how we might use programming to do what we need in Unity. And so this is not necessarily a programming course. It doesn't spend a whole lot of time saying like, this is what object-based programming is. This is how C# handles a lot of these things. It's more of kind of diving directly into it. And so it kind of assumes you have a little bit of a programming background. But even if you don't, you can still follow along and achieve some of the programming objectives and get some of these little mini games working, so you can kind of reverse engineer what they're doing. But I would still say it would be good to get a foundational understanding of C# or at least some other object-based language, maybe Java or something like that, so that you can kind of understand what's happening, even if you don't actually understand what's happening. And then they've got lots of these other ones as well. And so then, of course, you can get into Browse and you can search for all sorts of, different things. And so, like, if I wanted to learn more about lighting, I could click on that and it's going to have some courses. Again, this one you can see is 8 hours long. This is actually a really good one if you want to learn how to do lights, but then also a little bit more smaller, very specific things to do. And so sometimes we can see 2019, that's a lot older at this point. But there's lots of good little, like, here's how to do a very specific thing for your projects. And so kind of a little bit more bite-sized. And so anyways, Unity Learn, I really like it. Of course, you can type in if there's a specific thing that you want to learn how to do. Gosh, I don't even know what to search here. Modeling. And there you go. There's a little bit of modeling basics there. And sometimes this is stuff from Unity. Sometimes it's with associated kind of partners and stuff on YouTube. And again, sometimes it's new, sometimes it's older, and sometimes that doesn't matter, right? Sometimes the tools, even though they're kind of older, they still work just fine for the purposes of what we're going to be developing with. But anyways, that's a good tool for you as well. And then lastly, back in the Unity Hub, we have the Community tab, which is going to take us a few different places. And so Muse is actually Unity's new AI. And so think ChatGPT, but specifically trained and programmed for Unity. And so this is, I believe, a paid service. This is not something that you can just use like ChatGPT. And it's kind of interesting. Again, for newbies, I don't necessarily recommend relying on AI too much because you're not learning how to do things. But if you're super stuck on something, I will admit that every now and then if I'm like, I've tried it, I've asked some of my partners and they can't figure it out, or they're busy, more likely. I've got on various different websites. I've looked at a few different tutorials and I just cannot wrap my head around something. I've definitely used AI in the past, but you always have to remember that, the AI doesn't actually know anything. It's just kind of like, this is what we've been trained to think is probably a good solution for you. And so Muse specifically, I played with it for a little bit, and the very basic programming prompts that I did give it, like, make a script that can do, a jumping for character creator. It was able to do stuff like that. But it's not going to be able to program your whole game for you because you as the user have to know how to put all the pieces together, right? But it is a tool. It's a tool worth at least looking at and knowing, when to use it and when you need to figure it out yourself so that in the future, you also remember how to do those things, right? Next up, we've got the Unity Asset Store. And so this is a great one, especially if you're just kind of getting into it and you're like, I don't know how to make any assets. You can, again, come here and you can do stuff. Of course, most of the things on here are paid. And again, a lot of the times this stuff is old or of dubious sources. And so you have to kind of be careful with it. And so just because you get it on here doesn't mean it's something that you can use in your actual game. But it is, again, another resource. And so there is places on here somewhere that you can go and you can find stuff by Unity, which is usually free, in which case I usually say these are pretty safe, especially for learning. Oh, Unity has made changes. Excellent. Thank you. Go back. There we go. And so you can see I've downloaded some of these things over the years as frameworks and as tutorials and things to learn to kind of just play with. And so if I'm going to use anything, it's usually the actual official Unity assets because otherwise, like if I'm making games, I'm making those assets or I have people who are making those assets for me specifically, right? But again, something worth looking into. But, as a learner, I say get the free stuff. It's not worth spending a lot of money unless it's just like this is the absolute perfect thing and I can use this for 10 years, something like that. I'm sure, maybe. The Unity blog, this is updates from Unity themselves about, upcoming updates for the engine software, tips and tricks, and just kind of other musings from the company specifically. The discussions is going to be kind of like their forums where you can go in and you can get help from community members. Again, it is a forum, and so it's not necessarily like real-time help, but, it is a place to go in and discuss the technology and the games that you might be doing in one place. And then Unity Pulse is kind of how to check in specifically, provide feedback to the Unity team. If you want to do that, sure, great, fine. But anyways, let's go back here and let's look at how to actually set up a project real quick. All right. So once we are back up here in our projects tab, again, if you've never done this before, you shouldn't see anything here. But as far as like if I do have something here, it's as simple as clicking on that project and it will open it up in Unity 6 here. And so I just started this project right here with Unity 6. And so I clicked it. It took a few minutes and then it loaded in here. But say I need to make a new project, right? Because we're new to this. We will probably click on this big blue button up here that says New Project. And it'll give us a new window. And so from here up at the top, we can choose which version we want to use. I'll just use Unity 6 for now, since that's the new hot one that just came out. And then we've got a few things. We've got some templates. And the templates are going to be kind of like certain types of packages. Think Legos. And so like it has certain features all kind of packaged together depending on the type of game or project you might be wanting to make. And so it's got 3 highlighted here at the top, which are kind of like the main 3, just blank projects, get started and rock and roll kind of a thing. So you have Universal 2D, Universal 3D, and High Definition 3D. Regardless of what you pick, you can always go back and re-add all the features and packages later. And so if you're like, I started 2D and then we wanted to, maybe make it 2.5D. So it's like it's 3D assets, but in a 2D like camera view, you could go and you could add in all the features from these other ones later if you wanted to. And so that's what these are. They're templates. They're there to get you started. And so again, you can see those 3 are highlighted because those are just kind of the universal ones that most people would use. There's a few samples, in which case they have like little levels and projects set up for you to kind of explore and tinker around with things. But then they have other things. And so like if I know I'm making a 3D mobile game or a 2D mobile game or a mixed reality, an AR, a VR, various different things, platformer, first-person shooter, if I want to make cutscenes. It's not really a game, it's more of a movie, right? They have different things that you can click and it will have default things that you can do. And so if you're like, I really want to do a platformer, but I don't know where to start, you could click on this one, download the template, and it'll pull actually a project from the Unity store that will let you like play with it and kind of, again, reverse engineer and see how things work. Some of these, at least in the past, had tutorials, which I think I just saw that a second ago. Yeah, tutorials. In which case, again, it probably depends from project to project and year to year, depending on when you're reading this. But like how to actually do some certain things. And so again, if you're like, I really want to start making a Mario game, maybe download this one, download that. And you could look through the template and stuff. And you can click read more and it'll take you back to the website and stuff like that. But as far as just getting started with a project, we'll just go ahead and click on the Universal 3D because it's just, it's got enough to get us started in 3D. We could add more stuff if we want to, but we're beginners, so we probably don't need all those features. Over here on the right, we have some important pieces. Project name. name your projects. Please do not save everything as my project 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, because that's awful. And so again, if this was going to be a dinosaur game, right? Because I like making dinosaur games. And so we'll name this Dino Game Prototype, something like that, right? So it's descriptive, I know what it is, and so more importantly, when I go back to my hub, I know what game I'm actually clicking on, right? Next up is the save location. That's really important. Wherever you save your projects, I always say make a Unity projects folder so that you can have everything kind of in one place and they don't get scattered to the wind. If you just use the default Windows or Macintosh saving system, sometimes those can get kind of spread out and it can get kind of gross and it can clutter other project areas. And so I have on my D drive a space dedicated to the Unity projects. But, it's going to depend on where you want to save things. Down here below, if you have the Unity internet, like web saving and cloud saving set up, you can be part of different organizations. And so you can choose which organization to attach this project to. And so same thing here, you can set it up to the Unity cloud if you have that set up on your account so that you can basically save to the cloud. Again, I prefer using GitHub, but that's just, personal choices and stuff like that. And once you have this ready, you come down here to create project and it'll spin. It's going to make it. You'll get a different splash screen depending on the version of Unity that you're actually going to have. And this will take a few minutes depending on the things that you've selected. And so like just a default like 3D thing or a 2D shouldn't take too long. Again, it kind of depends on the power of your computer. If you have lots of RAM, if you have an SSD, if you have a good processor, those things will help it load faster. But like an old laptop, it could definitely take a little bit of time. But Unity is usually pretty good at running on older hardware, again, at least relative to the Unreal Engine. And so let's go ahead. We'll wait just a tick, and we'll come back as soon as this is ready to load. All right, and we're back. So here we now have Unity. And so this is Unity 6, which is slightly different than the one that I'm used to, which was 22. But it looks pretty much the same. And so again, anytime there's a big new update with software, it takes a little bit of time to learn because things have moved, things have had their names changed. But ultimately, this is, even to me, I've literally never opened Unity 6 before today. It still looks pretty familiar. And so this video specifically is not going to go over like what everything is, but do know that, as long as you've used Unity within the last 5, maybe even 10 years, this looks similar enough to where you'll be able to hop right back in and feel pretty comfortable, kind of a thing. But anyways, it's successfully loaded. I've got my hierarchy, I've got my screen, I can move stuff around. I've got my assets folders, and so everything is more or less what I remember with it. And so if this is your first time with Unity, I will have a different video at some point that I kind of walk through the basics of navigating the Unity interface and the Unity UI, but that is its own long kind of pathway and journey. And so if I don't have that video, there's plenty of videos on YouTube that you can find. But again, if you go to that Unity Learn, there's that Unity's Essentials course, which is actually really good. It goes step by step through all the different things. It has you making little mini projects to help you learn. And so that is always a thing that you can do there as well. But, seeing that this works, I'm going to go ahead and close this because there's one more thing that I want to show you guys for getting stuff set up, which is how to add an existing file or project. Because some of the assignments that I give you guys sometimes, it will give you a folder and the project is already ready for you to go in that folder, and you just need to open it up and then get started from there. And so that is going to be here, this add button. You have a few things. You can add from disk, which means add from your computer or your flash drive or something like that, or add from the repository, which is either if you're using the Unity Cloud Storage or GitHub or something equivalent to that, that's where you would be pulling that from. And so that's a pretty advanced feature. Most of you guys, it would probably be from the disk. And so again, it's maybe I go to the Unity store, I download a cool tutorial or a project, it saves to my computer, and I need to now launch that. This is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to add from disk, and it's going to give me this little pop-up window. And so you can see here I've got my Unity projects, and you can see some of my other projects, which not all of them are here. And so if I really wanted to, I could reopen some of these projects on here. But anyways, one of the lessons that I do is this Creative Core lighting project. And so you might see this in a future assignment from me. But I just click on the folder. If I click inside it, you can see I've got all of my folders for a normal Unity project. And so my assets, my libraries, packages, and stuff like that. And so if I go into it, there's lots of things. And so when I'm opening the project, again, navigate back to that project folder, find the entire folder, click it one time. There we go, one time, and then you'll click Add Project. I just did this, and so it's already right there, so I'm not going to click it again. But you would click that, and then it's going to add this here. And so now that this is here, I can just click on this one. It's already open. And so it would, again, reload, reopen, and now I would have that here. And so here I can see I've got all those same folders that I was just looking at. And so let's look in scenes. There's probably something in here. I'll click on Final Light Scene. And so now we can see here's this. And so I haven't actually had time to even look at this project yet, but it's loaded some kind of level ready for me to go. And so what's going to happen is in the actual assignment, on the website, I would have different things for me to do. And so it might say, click on this light. There we go. Click on that light. And then, come over here to the inspector and do different things with that light as part of the lesson and the tutorial and things like that. But that's it. That's, really, really easy. And so again, if you're installing a existing project from an assignment or someone else has sent you a project file, that's how you would actually add that there. And so then again, if I were to close this and relaunch Hub, all of these projects should stay here as well. So anyways, that is the basics of getting set up and getting projects started with Unity and the Unity Hub specifically. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. If you have any questions or comments, you're always welcome to leave comments in my YouTube videos, especially if you're not in one of my classes, right? Because then it's a little bit harder to get a hold of me. And so if you're from the rest of the world and the internet, thank you for watching this quick video. Again, I hope it was helpful. I plan to have more videos in the future that kind of go more in detail into Unity and game design stuff. And so otherwise, y'all have a great rest of your day, and I hope you learned something new.